stolen through SNAP benefit theft. That number exists because of the known vulnerability, the failure to put secure chips on EBT cards. A new report shows that Pennsylvania had the second highest theft of SNAP benefits in the country last month. Congress failed families when they did not give EBT cards the same basic protections every debit and credit card already has. They failed again when they let replacement program for stolen benefits expire, even as theft keeps rising across the country. Everyone else has fraud protection, and everyone else can file a reimbursement. But the 2 million Pennsylvanians who rely on SNAP are left with second-rate security and no way to recover when their benefits are stolen. That failure creates real hunger and emergencies for tens of thousands of families across the Commonwealth. This real waste, fraud, and abuse is a system that leaves families exposed to theft, lets millions of taxpayer dollars be stolen, and punishes seniors, children, and working families instead of protecting them. That is not just about replacing stolen benefits. It's about refusing to accept a system where the most vulnerable are treated as second-class citizens with fewer rights and fewer protections. It's about making sure that Congress, the state, and Conduit, the company that issues EBT cards, step up to do their part. The technology to stop rampant theft already exists. What's missing is action. Just Harvest is committed to making sure that families who rely on these benefits are protected. We are here today to discuss the next steps that we can all take together. We are proud to be joined by 3 dedicated legislators who have been instrumental in advocating for SNAP and for stronger protections and resources against SNAP stealing. Our speakers today include Representative Summer Lee, Representative Emily Kinkead, and Representative Abigail Salisbury. You'll also hear a statement from Artinese, who lived through SNAP theft and was forced to figure out how to feed her family with nothing left in her account. Her story makes the stakes clear. No one should have to face that kind of fear and that kind of uncertainty. We have the tools to prevent this, and we know what needs to be done. The only question left is, what do we choose to do next? Around 2:25, we will open it up to the media for Q&A. And I hand things over to Dan McCarthy, Just Harvest new grassroots organizer. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Super. My name is Dan McCarthy, and I'm a new grassroots organizer at Just Harvest, and I'm working hard with an excellent organization fighting critical issues like the hate speech. Community member Artinese Malachi was supposed to be here today, but unfortunately couldn't join us. This press conference and the action we're taking to issue is partially inspired by her story. I want to share a statement that we put together and share some of the content. Let's try this. There we go. Artinese is a resident of Penn House, a longtime member of the SEIU and an advocate for her community. SNAP benefits theft is deeply personal for her. She's seen members of her community lose their benefits. She's seen moms realize their benefits are stolen in the grocery store. Quote, 1 minute provide healthy food for your kids, and then the next minute you don't know where to go. Louder? Artinese has had her own SNAP benefits stolen as well. Last month, forcing her to rely on food pantries to get income. Her sister and her niece have also had their SNAP benefits stolen. Quote, my sister has kids, and now she has to work extra to drive around with food banks and bake for money. Thousands of people are losing their benefits to fraud in Pennsylvania families go hungry because of a problem with the system they were told to trust in. So big thank you to Artinese for sharing your story, and a thank you to all those who are fighting this issue and could be with us here tonight. Next, I want to introduce our next speaker, who of course needs no introduction, Representative Summer Lee. She is a champion of working families and has been fighting to protect SNAP and Medicaid in Congress. So please give her a warm round of applause.
I'll just move this down because I'm short, so we have to. Oh, Brother Stevens, if anybody knows how to use a microphone, I promise you, I got this. But good afternoon, everybody. I'm Summer Lee. I am a congresswoman from right here in the city of Pittsburgh and most of the surrounding neighborhoods. And it's my honor to be here to be able to stand up for those folks who are the most marginalized, the most vulnerable, and people who have for too long grown accustomed to systems failing them, systems cheating them, or systems failing to fix themselves. Before I start, I do want to thank Just Harvest, all of our community partners who have been convening us on this crucial issue, who have been standing in the gaps in every way that they possibly can, community members who have taken it upon themselves to help where the system itself could not. It's not just a lifeline for thousands of families in Allegheny County and across Western Pennsylvania, for children, for seniors, for working parents, just trying to make ends meet. And right now, too many of them are bearing the brunt of our country's failures. First, by an economic system that already stretches them thin, with rising costs that make life no easier. Second, by Trump's so-called big bullcrap bill that is signed into law that cuts billions of dollars from SNAP and our most critical programs, the biggest cuts we've seen in history, and lastly, by fraud. The reality is that when SNAP benefits are stolen, families are left scrambling to once again afford basic necessities like groceries. Our system shouldn't make it harder to feed families. Our president and legislative body shouldn't hinder our ability to access food. It's unconscionable for any of our neighbors, for any person to face hunger in one of the wealthiest nation in the world. Now more than ever, we need urgent action from every level of government, local, state, and federal, to both secure people's benefits and restore what's been stolen from them. That means strengthening fraud protection, streamlining reporting and replacement processes, and ensuring that nobody is left behind. I will do everything in my power in Congress to help restart the reimbursement program for stolen SNAP benefits. That includes supporting the families for victims of SNAP Skinning Act. This bill will permanently restore states' authority to replace stolen benefits. It will remove the cap so that victims receive the full amount stolen and ensures that federal funds can be used for replacements going forward. We have common sense solution. We just need common sense legislators to implement them. We owe it to our neighbors to make sure that no one in our community goes hungry. Not because of fraud, not because of bureaucracy, and certainly not because of wannabe dictators choosing profit over people. Pennsylvania deserves better, and we will fight to make it better for them. So I thank you all so much for being in this fight with us, for raising this critical, crucial issue. And I assure you that not only will we be getting this, your fight, your voice, up to my colleagues, but I'll also be able to fight to support my colleagues at the state level to ensure that they have all the tools that they need to be able to provide for every single Pennsylvanian. So thank you so much.
I would like to next introduce State Rep Emily Kinkead, who represents the PA's 20th District, serves as the co-chair of the Legislative Labor Caucus, and is the vice chair of the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee, and a tireless advocate against hunger. Please welcome.
Back and acknowledge we should help to not starve. That's unconscionable. It's unforgivable. And we need Congress to act. We have the ability to do it. $17 million is not a lot of money in the budget that we have at the federal government. But it makes all the difference in the lives of these individuals who are being impacted. And I think Congress should take a step further and not just replace those benefits, but also provide each and every state with funding necessary to get chip cards out to all of these recipients. But until we get that done, here in Pennsylvania, the one thing that I need everybody to be telling folks who are SNAP recipients is that they need to download the ConnectPT app and they need to lock the cards. That's what we have available to us to help protect their benefits right now. Lock your card, keep it locked unless you're actively using it until we can actually get Congress to care about our most vulnerable people. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Representative Abigail Salisbury, who represents Kate's district. She serves as chair of the Charity Nonprofit Caucus, supports critical members of our Congresswoman region, and fights for transportation, reproductive justice, SNAP education, and so much more. Please welcome
I'm going to tell a dad joke. I would love to come here and stand up for SNAP recipients, but can't actually stand up because I hurt my back and it's gotten a little worse since the day's gone. So normally I have to raise the hands when I'm up here and speak up here. I don't know what that. So a lot of people don't understand what we're even talking about when we talk about SNAP theft. What people think I'm talking about is people conning the system to get benefits they're not entitled to. So a lot of the time when I talk about SNAP theft, people think I'm repeating conservative talking points about, illegal immigrants streaming across the border and signing up for benefits they're not supposed to get and stealing from the government and all these things. That's not real. What is real is people installing card skimmers at the point of sale so that then you get your benefits drained out of your account within moments of them being deposited. So what happens then? What happens then is people reach out to their state representative's office, me, Representative Kinkead, and others, and they say, can you help us? And I imagine also at the federal level, they reach out and say, can you help us? And so they imagine that there's a pool of money that we can put back on their card. Sadly, there's nothing. So what can I direct them to at that moment? I can send them to the food bank or their local food pantry that gets food from the food bank as a downstream recipient. Now, our food bank is over in Duquesne, across the river from my district office in Braddock. And there's no bus stop there. So if you have limited mobility, such as I find myself in today, you have really very little ability to go and get food from there. You're going to have to walk about 3/4 of a mile from the bus stop over to the food bank, pick something up, and then carry a box of things back to the bus, perhaps, and now take that home and maybe have a good distance to walk from the bus back home. A lot of people just can't. They just can't. So that means they go without. We try to do what we can in the district office. My staff and I will sometimes are able to deliver emergency boxes of food right to people's homes. We're not This summer in my office, we were fortunate to have Ultima Curio as our summer intern, who is specializing in data mapping. So I tasked her at the beginning of her internship with making a data map, which has just been distributed to everyone who gets our e-blast in the district. Anyone who wants it can use it to interactively click on any of the 13 municipalities in the district and see that there has really been no substantive change in the number of people in the district who are being snapped from 2019 to today. There has been no enormous flooding the SNAP program since before COVID. There are no layabouts who refuse to go back to work because they're just getting fat and happy on SNAP benefits. It's not real. It's not real. SNAP fraud is not people who are unentitled to this program taking it. SNAP fraud is criminals snatching food out of the mouths of people in our communities, of our neighbors. And it is incumbent upon us to care, to do something about it. So, like my colleagues, I call on the federal administration and us in Pennsylvania too, to make it possible for people to just know enough to do, because they don't think that's asking too much.
Thank you all so much for inspiring words. I know let's turn it over for some question and answer. If you have a question in the press or the audience, just raise your hand, shout it aloud, and I'll pass the mic. Yes.
Well, the first and primary action that I take and I advocate for is that we don't cut SNAP benefits, right? Every budget we have half of our government say that they want to defund the programs, the anti-poverty programs that we have an abundance of evidence for that they work in our country. Medicaid, Social Security, and SNAP benefits. Every year we are in the fight for our lives to make sure that not only are they not cutting it, but that the American people know what they're trying and attempting to do undeveloped darkness, right? So part of this is education. Part of this is recognizing that the more stories that we hear from people, that the more organizations that we work with, that we understand their plight, that maybe those stories will resonate with some of our Republican colleagues who are a bit more cruel. You heard from my colleague at the state level, we talked about the impact on farmers. When I tell you that if you go to Congress, that very few people actually understand the impact of some of the actions that we take. You cut SNAP benefits, what are the residual effects of it? We're doing the work to make sure that people know that when they do it, because the reality is that there are two groups of people who don't care and people who don't know, and both are as dangerous. Secondly, when we talk about the impacts of the big bullcrap bill, they don't stop at the federal government. What ends up happening is that the state government has to pick up the slack. We put a burden, a really, really big burden on our state governments now to make up for the cuts that the federal government has taken. That's left our state government with a late budget. So while we're doing all the things we're doing, because we've had continuing resolution after continuing resolution, and then this reconciliation bill in the middle of the night, they weren't able to do the work that they needed to do to allocate funds for things that they already have within their jurisdiction. Now they're taking up the mantle and having to pick up where we left off. So we don't want to leave our states in a worse condition. We don't want to leave our states having to make up the difference now on both SNAP and Medicaid. So those are some of the things that we're worried about. We talked about, in my remarks, I talked about the bills that we're championing right now that would be a resolution to this very specific problem. But at the end of the day, the best resolution is funding SNAP. Number one, and then it's anti-poverty policies, right? Which we know are cyclical. We talk about feeding people. Well, that starts with education, that starts with job opportunities, that starts with protecting our unions, that starts with housing people, that starts with healthcare and ensuring people are going into medical debt. People shouldn't have to choose between whether or not they're going to pay for their groceries, and I'll tell you what, they're very expensive right now. Paying for their grocery or paying for their bills, all of these things are interconnected. So even as we advocate for one thing, at the end of the day, what we need to and we must continue to advocate for are anti-poverty policies, period.
So I just want to add, at the state level, because I think that this really needs to be highlighted, given that we don't have a state budget right now, it gives us a tiny opportunity to actually silver lining in all of this chaos. We can fully fund the programs at the state level that are most effective in addressing food insecurity. The state food purchase program, the Pennsylvania agricultural surplus system, senior food boxes, we can ensure that those programs get more funding. There is no way for the state to fill the hole that the federal government has left us with. But this is a way that we can support our food banks who are about to receive an onslaught and have been because of these steps, an onslaught of others. I was talking to folks from our PA, and they were telling me that they have distributed and sheer counted more food per month now than they did during the pandemic. So we are seeing a major crisis, and at least at the state level, we could be fully funding the state food purchase program, the PASS program, and increasing money for senior food boxes to ensure that at least we are doing our part to fill that void.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Nicole, Dr. of the University and the National Yes. And my question is there are any efforts to help people with low digital skills and people who don't speak English to follow the instructions and the benefits are not stolen. Many people don't have a smartphone, many people don't know how to download an app, and many people don't understand English. So I just wanted to know if there are any initiatives that you can, where someone can go and get them to follow those steps.
Well, so the question is, for folks who do not have access to a smartphone, who perhaps don't speak English, or have other barriers to accessing benefits, what assistance is there for them? Where can they go to access them?
I would say you should go and encourage them to talk to their state representatives, state senators, members of Congress, go to the government offices because we can help people to access those things. And the number of times that folks have come into my office just for help of like how do I download this app? We can do that, absolutely. And even if we in our office don't necessarily have somebody who speaks that particular language, we do have access to language translation services. There's a federally qualified health center down the street from my office, and people happily just wander down there, and they have translation services for, I think, 50 plus languages, and you know, you can certainly help with that. Food banks are another really critical service for accessing that in our office.
Yeah, please come on.
Again, Sanders, I'm the Director of Public Benefits Policy and Programs at Wells Fargo's Managers and Outreach Team. I just wanted to note that the ConnectPT app, which is the only way that people can watch it is only available in English and Spanish, so it does require someone to help someone memorize the screen if they were going to use it. And I think that this is one of those instances where we see that basically a monopolistic corporation is conduit has this contract for almost over 30 states. There's only one other provider in the country. Is really failing the people that they're
ways. The first very direct question that you asked is Congress talking about it? Well, the answer is yes and no, right? Because the reality is that it's a hyper-local issue. Across the country, we have food deserts. Those food deserts are more likely to be in Black and brown communities. They're more likely to be in communities that are already next to an environmental justice issue, a hazard, or polluted. They're more likely to be transportation deserts. And they're more likely to be in areas that have been historically redlined in some ways. The federal fixes for that don't necessarily exist because the federal government doesn't think of it as a federal issue. They don't think about issues impacting, disparate communities as the issue of the federal government. They think of it as the issue of the neighborhood of the community that's inflicted by that problem. What we saw, you brought up two of the difficult considerations we have, right? The Hill District and others. Right? These are communities that have been systemically disinvested, which means that it results in population loss. Right? The historic Hill District, which was a bastion, a center, the epicenter of Black life in this area. Well, their residents have been dispersed out throughout the county. So it's a lower residency rate. And even as we're investing in all the things around it, what ended up happening is that one could argue that the grocery store may have been just a little too soon. Because right now, we're proud that we were able to fight for $50 million in the Choice Neighborhood Grant to help with Bedford dwellings. And we know how imminent and urgent that is. We know how right now the immediate that crisis is. We have people, not just in Bedford dwellings, but we've been dealing with empty affordable properties across the county and the region. These folks, especially private equity, who are using public dollars to keep people living in squalor. They're keeping them living in dangerous conditions. And then when you add that and compound it, then they also don't have a grocery store in their community. We're fighting right now with transit to fund Port Authority in Pittsburgh, set that up in Philadelphia, and we're getting fought tooth and nail by people in the middle of the state who's like, well, public transportation in urban areas isn't a us problem. So even when we talk about how hard it is for us to get those dollars for these necessary lifelines, right, we're fighting even people within our own state to do that. The House has already passed their part of the budget 5 times. That was fun. Fully fund Port Authority so that we don't find ourselves in a funding gap in 2 more years, right? And that's what the Republicans are looking for. So basically, put it back there in 2 more years. So when we're talking about what conditions we need, we need to make it easier for folks to get grocery stores into their community. We need to talk about what type of grocery stores, what type of things, produce, what types of things that actually need in their communities. We need to talk about monopolies like Target and Walmart. Your Giant Eagles, all the folks who are basically pushing moms and pops out of businesses, and then people find themselves with nothing standing in the gap, so we need to make it easier for those moms and pops to exist. That bodega, we don't have the bodega model here in Western Pennsylvania, but what we need to do is figure out what will work in micro communities that are on the uptick, right? They might not be where they were 50 years ago, 20 years ago, but they're not going to get back there until we've made this very baseline investment. So the URA has a role to play in that. The URA, so the city, obviously, the county has a role to play in that, the state and the federal government. But each of them have to be in lockstep for communities to actually get the resources that they need. One of the things that we are able to help with at the federal level, which is really specific, is the one thing that is specific to the individual congressperson, is that we have community project funding. When do we get community project funding? So we're able to work a little bit more closely with communities to assess their actual needs, to make sure that dollars are getting out to the people who are actually doing the work. One of the things we're able to help with is the food bank, right? Making sure that the food bank has dollars to get their vans out, new vans, and that they're going to some of these communities that are food deserts right now to stand in the gap. We had to do that because the federal government is cutting the dollars that are going to food banks, so we were able to do that. But then they cut community project funding. So we're waiting to see if that exists. But in those things, we stand and we try to stand in the gap. So if you know community organizations that are doing work around food insecurity, let us know. We want to meet them, we want to talk to them, and we want to figure out how we can get their application to be as strong as they can be so that we can make it out of the appropriations process so that we can get these dollars here while we're figuring out the bigger solutions for how no community goes without fresh produce in their neighborhoods. The last thing I will say, the last piece of that is also making a change in the investment investment, right? We talk a lot about farming, but we don't talk a lot about urban farming. Well, that was changing, right? We had folks from urban communities, black communities, who are serving in agricultural committees across the country, right? I remember when when Shirley Chisholm became the first black congresswoman, and she was put on agricultural committee. Back there, a lot of people said, well, why would I, a representative from Brooklyn, be on that committee? And she realized, well, you know what? That's where we can do SNAP. That's where we can do childhood nutrition. We can do weight. We can do all of this thing. So because of that change in perspective, we're starting to get more resources and more attention on what urban farming, urban needs are around agriculture. So all of those shifts have to happen right now to really address food deserts. Do I think that the federal government is going to do it right now? No. Sorry.
So at the state level, we do have legislation to do fresh food financing, which again, we need a budget to be able to fund, but it would provide funding for some of these shops in the areas to actually expand and provide fresh fruits and vegetables, provide produce in food deserts. And you know, the thing that I think we've allowed far too many of my colleagues across the aisle to get away with is that they talk about public transit like it's only an urban issue. They only talk about the Southeast and SEPTA. There is public transit in all 67 counties, and in the 5 different bills that we have sent to the Senate, all of them disproportionately advantage public transit in rural areas. We are looking at public transit in Jefferson County getting a $6 per rider subsidy from this proposal. $6. PRT, $1.08. SEPTA, 85 cents. Now, in terms of raw dollars, yeah, absolutely. We get more money than the smaller transit authorities. SEPTA gets more money than we do, but it's also proportionate. All of our smaller transit authorities are benefiting more than per rider. Are benefiting more than we are. Some of them are getting more than 100% of their entire operating budget under this plan. And that's good because in those areas they have food deserts too. And it's wild to me that in these places where they are major producers of food, that there would be food deserts. And their food banks are struggling because they don't have the kind of investment to be able to meet the need. More people in rural areas than urban areas are, you know, per capita, are on Medicaid, SNAP. They are harming their own constituents by refusing to take action on this, and they are doing it by only talking about SEPTA, by only talking about PRT. And we can solve that, and we need to talk about it more because it isn't just food insecurity isn't just an urban issue. SNAP theft is not just an urban issue. Food deserts are not just an urban issue. In fact, medical deserts, yeah, not just an urban issue. In fact, far less likely to be an urban issue. Transportation deserts, not just an urban issue. All of these things impact rural areas and actually impact them to a far greater degree because they have a far less access to resources. And yet we are seeing Republicans actually put more harm to their own districts because they don't acknowledge that.
Thank you all so much. Oh, we'll do one last question. Absolutely.
the missile question I got because I ain't put my suit jacket back on. The reality is that I personally get nothing out of talking about Trump. Trump's not a boogeyman to me. He's not a buzzword to me. I deal with reality, and I deal with the reality of the situations that we are living through right now. And right now, through our reconciliation bill, Donald Trump and his administration, that includes Republicans in Congress, made the biggest cuts to SNAP in history. That's right now. When we think about what's happened to get us here, certainly. We can talk about all the work requirements that have been suggested, that have come up in our bills that we've had to vote on. We can talk about the different poison bills that we've had to vote on. But at the end of the day, the people who have said and told us out loud that they do not believe that people should be fed, that they should be housed, that they should have hospitals or insurance to be able to take care of themselves when they have illnesses, the people who make also the biggest cuts in Medicaid in history, it is Donald Trump and his administration and the Republican Party. That's who it is. So whether you take that as being partisan or bipartisan, Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, none of them are the president right now. As a congresswoman in the 119th Congress, we are dealing with the fallout of the actions that we have taken this year. So what I'm talking about are the actions that we've taken from January 20 of 2025 to on today, August 15 of 2025. And those have been catastrophic. They've been damaging, and even if some of them won't take effect until 2027, it's important that we tell the tale. It's important that we put a face and a name to who has done harm to people, because we know that 2 years is a really long time for people to remember why we are in the position that we're in. When we think about who have cut critical services, it's the same song over and over again. Now, is that talking about the bravery or the cowardice of the other party? No. We're just talking about who did it, what they've done, and what we now need to do to get there. Like we said, and I mentioned, we have bills, we have actions that we can take. They exist. And right now, with the Republican trifecta, if they don't like the characterization of Republicans who cut SNAP benefits, then they can change it right now. They don't have to wait for another president. They don't have to ask what the last president did, and they don't have to wait for the next president. We can do it right now. When we go back on September 2nd, we're going to go right back into the next budget debate. Will we protect people? Will we feed more people? Or will we cut more critical services? I think we all know the answer of what they would like to do. The question is whether we're able to come up with a defense to fight back against that, and if we're going to be able to last over the next at least 2, maybe 4, or even more years.
It's sick. And it may still wait.
governments. If you act fast, the federal government will still pay for half of it. And we're calling on them as a corporation to strengthen the protections of their machine and to actually have some responsibility on things that we have asked them and we pay them to do. Families in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania, cannot. Today's briefing will be recorded, has already been recorded, and it will be available later on our YouTube channel for this purpose. And we'll do our best to share it with all of you afterwards. In the back of the room, there are fact sheets, if you haven't grabbed them already, that talk more about this issue in depth. And there's also an action that you can take. We'll have a QR code and some instructions reaching out to state leaders, legislators, and of course, folks in Congress to push forward the issues we're going forward today. So please lend your voice to that. The more of us who can speak on these issues, the more power